Tony, it's such a pleasure to welcome you.
It's good to be here.
One of the few names known in the Silicon Valley who have seen literally the evolution of the current technology from its inception.
Yeah,
so it's
well,
wonderful to have
I
you
don't
here.
go as far back as semiconductors.
No, you don't. But the 90s have been a great time.
Yeah, it was
you
great.
Know, the advent of the internet as we know it, and been covering technology since then. And it's a pretty long journey and a very exciting ride for all of us, and especially for you.
Yeah.
So why don't we start from where we are? I mean, I'll take the example of Yahoo because that's where it all started.
Sure.
And then where it ended, and why companies like Yahoo couldn't keep up,
Right.
or change fast enough,
Sure.
or adapt fast enough.
Sure.
So,
Well, it's interesting you asked that question, but I kind of, at this point, kind of say that we're on the third wave of the internet, okay? The first wave, as you said, was about Yahoo and search engines and Netscape, the first commercial web browser, and of course we have to remember Tim Berners-Lee, the CERN student that invented the web. But that was really about just convincing the world that the internet was going to be the real information highway. So people forget, in 1993, there was only 3 million people using the internet, largely people within university systems. Spinning forward, we obviously had the bubble, there was first excitement, but then a lot of despair. Silicon Valley's reputation was very much under assault. But then, sure enough, the Mark Zuckerbergs, kept coming. I remember meeting Mark for the first time in Palo Alto, and he had just started Facebook and was just coming for the summer to learn from Silicon Valley. And then I think we saw that whole era, which I think is the second wave of the web, which I call the socialization, which includes the sales forces, putting everything out on the cloud, to social networking, to blogging, to commenting, and now I think we're moving into more of an artificial intelligence, machine learning, kind of sorting through data and robots and drones and Internet of Things. So things are continuing to accelerate.
you have been writing. Your book has been bestseller. Second time over. When you look at entrepreneurs, and they say they're cut from the same cloth, and you can answer this better than anybody else. How do you advise the current crops, saying that challenges remain the same, but the technology evolves? The adaptability is the key word here. So what is your advice to the current entrepreneurs based on so much influx of technology evolution?
Well, it's interesting because you can't really, there isn't really a prototype successful entrepreneur, except I would say that entrepreneurs work hard, successful entrepreneurs work hard. As Steve Jobs says, these overnight successes sure take a hell of a long time. So you got to dedicate yourself to the long-term vision. You should have a noble cause, and I think that comes naturally. So when I met Steve Jobs when I was 12 years old, he was showing me Pong, and he said, "Oh, everybody was going to want a personal computer," and I was very skeptical at 12. But he turned out to be right. So they have a noble cause, and I think the ones that are successful want to change the world. I would also turn that around to venture capitalists and remind people who support entrepreneurs that the greatest companies economically always turned out are the ones that are still run by the original entrepreneurs. So I'm personally, both as an entrepreneur and as a media analyst, very disappointed that Travis over at Uber got kicked out of the job, because I think it was the same kind of maniac that he is that helped him go up against governments and the New York City yellow cab drivers unions and everything. That's what made Uber what it is, and you still need that guy in the front seat if you want to continue to dominate what is now becoming a very competitive market.
When you see entrepreneurs trying to model themselves against successful other entrepreneurs, so is there room for another Facebook? Is there room for another Twitter? Or they should just learn from these and be more original and more creative?
Well, it's interesting because part of my thesis of the Internet Bubble book, and I was just looking at a historical So what financial history would say that we always overfund the beginning of a new cycle, then it blows up, but then the real action happens. So I actually turned out to be overly conservative in my prediction, which in '99 I said that 80% of the great companies that will be associated with the internet will happen after the bubble bursts, but it's more like 95.
Wow.
So when you think that there's just enough social networks, all of a sudden a snap comes along. Just when you think that there's no more running room on the internet, you have machine learning come into play. Just when you think we figured all the different ways to finance a company, you now have cryptocurrencies have come onto the scene. So, it seems like entrepreneurs will always figure out new ways to create new companies and do new things.
I want to talk about the societal and political implication of using technology.
Yes.
Twitter and Facebook has done amazing things, and we always go back to take examples of the Middle East revolution the last few years, and most recently the U.S. election. And then the other part, which is the emerging concern, is the securing the IP and through the cyber attacks.
Right.
So there are two different ways of looking at the global implications of using technology and protecting your IP.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, the one thing, these are complicated, each of which we could talk about for an hour or more. But I think the kind of the common theme here is that Silicon Valley and the innovation that we create out of what I call the global Silicon Valley, which is the entrepreneurs that are tied together throughout the world, 60% of which I think still here in the Bay Area. But we are impacting more and more businesses and culture in ways that we could have never imagined. So we're using the election as an example. I think at the end of the day, put your feelings about Trump aside, America was ready for a disruption. Like, we got to the point where we were comfortable with living with disruption, and we decided we were so comfortable with it, we can apply it to government and big institutions like media and things like that. I think that out of all the issues, one of the things that I'm looking at the most is, the impact on the workforce, and in particular, just the human as their own node. Like, before you could work for a big company for a long period of time, now that we're all connected to all these web services and emails and chats, we can't hide, and so our skill sets become very, whether we have skills or not, become very obvious, and how productive we are is very traceable. So I think it's an exciting time to be an individual in the professional world, in that there's more of an opportunity to create your own profession. But on the other hand, it's going to be more competitive and more accountable, and for many people, a little more scary.
Finally, on the role of media and
Yes.
the leverage of technology.
Yes.
Again, you're a media guy. Technology has enabled anybody anywhere in the world to plug in whatever the viewpoint is.
Right.
Right. Good or bad, right or wrong, doesn't really matter. So how do we separate the wheat from the shaft, the myth from reality?
Well, what I do know is that, if you trace it back, when I was a kid, you had ABC, NBC, and CBS, and they each had an hour worth of news, and they were competing against each other, and it was highly produced news, and there was not a lot of fake news, okay, because of the scarcity of time and production dollar. Then it exploded and just kind of went wild, and really, we had fake news and low quality news and no news at all and all that. What I'm hoping to pioneer, and this is just yet to be determined, is the ability to leverage blockchain, okay, and at the heart of my own new media brand, Alchemist, and figure out a way to leverage blockchain technologies to actually verify people's profiles, to also verify content, and actually assign rewards to the best content, the best thinking, and the best outcomes. So I guess the moral to the story is just when you think things are out of control, entrepreneurs and technologies coming back into play, addressing issues, and hopefully doing their best to solve some of the areas where the media get off the track.
Such a pleasure, Tony. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.